Hello and welcome to the Clean Call for Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. I'm Katie Boyd. I am just introducing us here. Tamara Ludley is going to facilitate, and she's just running a few minutes late, so she'll join us soon. I thought we could just go around. I think most of us know most of the folks in the room. We have a couple more folks coming in, but maybe we could just do quick introductions of who's here. And then if there's, so if you have just sort of name, affiliation, and anything else you might want to tell us about in terms of your work. And then if you have a topic that you'd like to discuss, it's an informal discussion today. So if there's anything you'd like to be addressed, mention that and we'll try to get it on the agenda here. So I'm Katie Boyd, the Clean Program Manager. I otherwise work doing research and evaluation on educational projects at CERES Education and Outreach, which is one of the NOAA cooperative institutes based at the University of Colorado. Kind of a lot of things in my affiliation there. And I didn't have anything particular that I was hoping to address in terms of discussion today, but I'll think about it. If something comes up, I'll put it in the chat. So I'm going to pass it off to Frank, because you're the first on my list here. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and then if you have any topics for discussion, and then passing it on to someone else. I think you're muted, Frank.
Okay, hopefully that's better. I'm Fred Bradshaw from Portland, Oregon. I'm with Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network, as well as Portland State. And I really don't have anything burning to talk about. So on that note, Wendy's next to me on my Hollywood Square, so I'll pass it off to her.
I always wanted to be on Hollywood Squares. Hi, everyone. Wendy Abshire, meteorologist by training, geoscience educator by many years of profession. I was with UCAR. I now am the director of the American Meteorological Society's education program. And we are a K-13 program working to increase earth science literacy and access to quality data. We have grant and private sector funding to support teacher education in weather, ocean, and climate science. And we package our curriculum packages, also make those available for an undergraduate audience, especially non-science majors. And I do not have any particular topics today. I am curious how things are going with ACE and the Biden administration, but I don't know if any of us on the know anything about that. So, oh well, Deb's joining. Deb may know. So that's. I'm sure we'll have a useful discussion. Next on Hollywood Squares for me is Paige.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paige Engelbrechtson. I'm the Nature Center Education Specialist for the Highlands Biological Foundation out in Western North Carolina. Working to get a better understanding of what my organization can do to promote climate change education in our 2-county region, as well as more broadly. One of the topics that I've started digging into is climate change storytelling, because I think one of the things that'll be most effective for the people in my region will be understanding through retelling their own stories and hearing other longtime residents of how things have changed. I know there are a ton of great resources out there that I haven't really gotten a chance to get into yet, but if we have time and nothing else to talk about, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Tamara, you are next on my list.
Okay, I'm Tamara Ledley. I just got back from teaching my global climate change class at Bentley University and drove home to be here for this call. And I'm also a bit involved with the Blue Hill Observatory and Science Center, working to develop some teacher professional development programs around climate change and actually gearing up to, the Blue Hill Observatory is undergoing major renovation. And so the actual building, they're going to continue the record. For those of you who don't know, the Blue Hill Observatory has the longest meteorological record in the United States. It goes back to 1885. But they're renovating the building. So while they have had a parallel tower there for a year now with instruments both at the top of the main tower and the temporary tower, The building will be closed except for those observations for 18 months starting in May. So working on getting ready to do that. So, and also doing lots of climate solutions workshop using the En-ROADS decision support model. Okay, so I don't know who hasn't gone yet because I got here late. How about Deb?
Sorry, can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
You can hear me. Oh, good. I thought I was muted and I got like 10,000 windows open on my screen right now. So, all right, I'll go ahead. I'm Deb Morrison. I'm at the University of Washington. And is there a focal question for today? I came in a tiny bit late.
I was just asking us to introduce ourselves, where, affiliation or some of your work. And then I was actually asking for if anybody had any discussion agenda items they wanted to add to the list.
That's great. So yeah, so I'm Deb. I'm a learning scientist. I work a lot in research practice partnerships and am like fairly involved right now in some of the national level work around understanding what climate action, empowerment, and justice efforts will be in the nation. And so, yeah, I don't have any pressing question for discussion item, but I'm interested to just hear what folks want to talk about. And I'm not sure who hasn't gone. So Katie, can you nominate someone else?
Yeah, Nancy? And I know she was in the process of eating, so.
I'm Nancy Glock-Grunak. I live in Santa Cruz, California. And I'm a lifelong educator, curriculum writer, faculty development person, and now working through Within Reach, which is a local organization that I began to do informal education and pull together knowledge resources that will support that at different levels of scale and involvement and so forth. I think a question that I would find interesting, we are currently developing a more detailed proposal to make Santa Cruz a pilot program for ACE and connect it to the city. Our city just entered into contracts with 4 consultants a week ago. Really, their proposals look excellent. They have one specifically for equity with green lining. They have a public engagement group called Blue Point, as well as the Rincon, which is their primary technical experts on GHG reduction and measurement and so forth. And then a smaller group called Harris that specializes in helping cities find the money to do these things on a sustainable basis. It looks like an exciting group of people to work with. So it seems timely to start spelling out what we mean when we talk about an ACE pilot. And so I would be interested to have your sense, when you think of a local pilot, what would we be testing? What are the questions we'd be asking? What are the things we'd be trying out and so forth, with a particular concern for equity, because that's a very high priority. And Santa Cruz, we are almost, I would say, 50-50 Latinx and Anglo, and yet it's almost never talked about. And most Latinx live in our county, but not in our city. So I'll put that out there for conversation. I'd love to learn from you what you'd like to see in it. If it's to circle back to you, how might it be the most helpful?
Thanks, Nancy. I'm going to toss it to Jason next.
Hi, Jason Cervenak. I'm at Ohio State. I work at a Polar and Climate Center and lead the outreach program there. And so I think it's been a fun semester trying to keep research going on as we go on for a year in outreach, we've been pretty successful, but I think everybody else being in the office is creating a lot of undue work because they're creating new projects for us to work on. And so it's been I would say the last 2 months have been slightly overwhelming. So I've actually missed the calls, and I'm just trying to catch up on stuff like a soap opera, like kind of dropping in to figure out where in the plot everything is and contribute where I can. So thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Jim Callahan, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, Katie. Hi, everybody. Given that we generally do know each other, I guess staying on the line of latest projects or current focuses, things, ours would be, so climatechangeeducation.org and Mobile Climate Science Labs, also working with Lowell School in Washington, D.C. The focus right now with us is debuting our new live stream TV capabilities and doing multicam live hands-on, or not hands-on, but remote science labs on climate change and ways taking climate action for science festivals and schools events. Now, along with that is that it's more allowing the middle school students and high school students to integrate internationally and nationally live to interconnect on science that's going on right now in front of them, what the students are doing. I think that also ramps up our capabilities as making videos of interest. And Katie, I think you know, we did get the okay. We got the yes to present a video for CLEAN, or on the focus of CLEAN, of course, with the student's point of view using CLEAN for the STEM video showcase. And that's an example of being able to, the idea of being able to share our ability to make videos and for students to be the presenters of those videos to the network itself, not just what we do. Okay. So, and thank you, Katie, for making it happen. Also saying that everything gets cleared by you and Anna and Frank and Deb and everybody. You know, the content of the video, we have time to make it, but it'll be good. So.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Thanks, Jim. Amy, do you mind introducing yourself next?
Hi there, everybody. My name is Amy Frame. I'm the K-12 program manager at 10 Strands. Do a lot of work in environmental literacy throughout California's K-12 schools, but also dipping more and more into CTE and community college progression. And I think that is one question that's on my mind, is about the education system is complex and slow moving and fragmented enough. How in the world do we get it connected with the kind of energy transformation that needs to happen in the whole economy? And I know that's not an easy question, but I'm just saying that I come away from these calls every week with a bit more insight into that. And I'm always, just wondering how to make that work even better. And I don't think that we heard from Eric yet. So good morning from California, Eric.
Hi, Amy. Yep, also from California. Sorry to get on late. Had a crisis. My wife left her reading glasses at home, so I had to run them over to her school site this morning. I live in Oakland, California. Been doing climate work educational work for the better part of 25, 30 years. Many years was at a science museum here in Oakland called Chabot. But now kind of the focus of my kind of on the ground work is with a group called the Community Resources for Science. So we do a lot of environmental professional development programs. So we're running another string of them this spring from March through May. So if any of you or colleagues would like to sort of be either part of that effort, it's kind of connecting dots. So it doesn't have to be, it's not run through CRS, but sort of where the conduit or we can post it on our website, or you can do you can do one with CRS. We could partner, lots of options. I'll put in the chat the link to the fall series that we did. So we're going to repeat some of them and then invite partners to do new ones. But I'm also really excited about these calls, kind of like Amy. I learned something each time. And sort of one of my areas of fascination is sort of the local to global perspective. So the idea of what's happening here in Oakland on the ground with youth in particular. I'm doing some projects right now, like Jim, with video, specifically having their voices being heard through video, sustainability projects that we can showcase in some of the Oakland schools and sort of in the community areas too, some of the regional parks that are here. And then pairing that with sort of an understanding at the global scale about how climate systems work and how they're changing. So, for example, why is California in this drought and why do we seem to be having less and less rain each year? So being able to tell that story sort of through visualizations. I reached out to Noah recently some of Frank's colleagues. Ned Gardner in particular does a lot of visualization work. So I reached out to him to see if he can connect me with resources that NOAA has to sort of tell that bigger picture, but pair that with what's happening on the ground and how communities are building, resilience and adapting to change, and really lifting up voices like we've been talking about in a lot of these calls, youth voices, diverse voices. So that's kind of this project, larger scale thing that I'm sort of personally working on and trying to connect the dots with some of my other on the ground stuff.
Okay, is there anybody else who hasn't, since I came in a little bit late, I'm not sure who else.
I was just
Laura?
writing you a note, Tamara. I think Laura Love has not introduced herself if she's
Okay.
willing.
Everyone, I'm Laura Love. I work with a climate change education and outreach festival called Get Off the Grid EduFest, and it's located in the southeastern portion of the United States.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I've seen a number of in the chat. There's been a number of suggestions about conversation points, and one of the ones that intrigued me, there's somebody had mentioned talking about the ACE strategy update, but then I think it was Nancy's ideas around how would a local pilot look with respect to the ACE strategy. Sounds intriguing to me. So unless somebody else wants to discuss something else, I thought that if Nancy could describe that a little bit more and we could get some input from everybody else on what that might look like, I think that might be a good topic of conversation.
Great. I'm delighted. So one of the person who first suggested this to Clean and then to me and others here was Emily Corin. I'm sorry Emily's not here today, but we've continued to meet and talk about it. And I was given the opportunity to write the requirements into the RFP for community engagement. And I didn't yet know ACE, but that's part of the reason I was so delighted to find out about it, because it was very resonant with what we were already talking about. And I think I'll just emphasize some things that currently on my mind, I'll speak for myself right now. The concern of the city, they are genuinely committed to climate change, and we have a full-time person in our small city whose job is to focus on these things. And there's also a genuine commitment to equity and inclusion. And they hired people who will be very good at doing that. So I think the notion of how can we, first of all, assure that the city receives high quality advice from the community and how much the city will be able to follow through on that. That's basic for where the city's coming from. What I'm looking for is that the opportunity to educate the public in order to get feedback, that it emphasize the solutions across all sectors, the kinds of answers that can surface, not just focus on what the city itself can do as an instrument of government, but that it is actually, hold on just a second, that it mobilizes, animates and mobilizes all the different communities in Santa Cruz to understand the variety of ways they can make a difference, all the way from their own life choices up through local and larger level political decisions, as well as looking at the economy, technology. Regenerative farming is a big issue in this area, education, schooling, etc. That every sector, they're introduced to the most promising emergent answers to stretch their imaginations and lift their hearts and give them a sense of direction and strategy. Not only what are the changes that we need, what are the changes that are already occurring, but how those can best be achieved. And then another dimension is really supporting people at different ages and different circumstances to answer where do I fit into this question? What does this mean to me in terms of risks and dangers and questions of resilience? And where do I fit in terms of my gifts and ability to support and contribute to what needs to be done?
So Nancy, the way this is sounding, sounds like, at least at this point, that you're talking about how the individual can integrate into the larger picture. I'm curious as to whether, when you talk about this pilot of the ACE strategy, whether it has target audiences or is it more of a trying to coordinate efforts?
Let me modify then. I think I haven't communicated. All I'm saying at the moment is that in addition to trying to get feedback from people, we want to be able we want to be able to build their capacity and their commitment to taking actions in the community that are also community-led. I think ACE itself is the best example of what I'm talking about. ACE did not, as it turned out, could not afford to wait for the US government at that time to direct it. And similarly, this is an opportunity to educate our community in the actions they can take as a community across the diversity of communities. So we're looking, certainly, as I said, we have farmers, farm workers, Hispanic youth, very strong youth leadership. And I guess the third thing I would want to build out from that is that the process of doing this education is an opportunity for a whole lot of other local initiatives that are already in the works to come together in a coherent and structured fashion. Again, emulating the idea from ACE that you have many volunteers and professions that are individually doing different things, but how do you bring that together into a coherent picture of reinforcing each other, complementing each other's efforts and so forth, but not just individually, but certainly or at the level of organizations, agencies, businesses, professions, et cetera, looking at the impacts on every profession. In our town, we have the Romero Institute, which has spent the last year working on creating a California Green New Deal that they've been getting input from all over the state. So I'm saying, okay, in addition to educating our local populations on what the city can do, they can also, at the same time, with the same effort, be learning what the state can do. They can be learning what local farmers are already doing, what the different organizations are. All of that requires, moving now to the next point, a knowledge base that I've started calling, I have a new name for it. It's called the ACE base. It's a knowledge base that encompasses these different answers and solutions at different levels of scale, local and national. And then another part is the effort to do that, to multiply the benefits from it, because the hardest job is always the outreach and engagement and getting into deep conversations that are two-way, three-way, mutual across the different constituencies to see to what extent they can share a vision. All of that effort has the potential of creating what could be processes and structures that outlive the 15-month planning process. So for the city to create and support that with a climate action center, we have 5 colleges and universities here or nearby that we turn to. Their students all need assignments. If they're graduate students, they may need theses. Research needs to be done. And there's always a starting from scratch effort to try to get some, quote, let's get some student interns. A climate action center could be an ongoing nexus between our university, K through 12, and all of the different players that I was just talking about. So hopefully the amount of effort, political capital, relationship building that we would be focusing on would produce processes that outlive the planning process and go beyond implementing that plan once set up, but actually strengthen, not only motivate, but bring coherence and underlying structure to the community-wide effort. Along with that, we have a very, very strong CCL organization here. 350.org and any number of national organizations have strong local branches. So connecting back up to those national level. And that effort can be not only educating and getting feedback to the city that is that much more useful because it's well informed and people's vision has been strengthened, but then the people can pick up the actions that will help carry that forward so that the whole community owns it. The other dimension.
So Nancy,
one last point, Tamara, and then I'm done. And then the other dimension is resilience. Many people lost their homes. The fires were very, very near us, and they're only going to get worse each year. So those are all the ideas that are out on the table at this point, and I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess Deb, you've put a lot of very provoking questions probing questions into the chat, and so we can explore some of those. But I guess what I'm asking is does any piece of this resonate with activities of any of the rest of you are involved with in terms of how to take this large national scale plan and implement it in a local context? And is that one question that Deb posted that I think is very thought provoking is how do planning and implementation iterate? I mean, so it sounds like Nancy is in the process of trying to gather information to implement something, but then it really does need to iterate with what becomes effective and what others are what the needs of everybody are. So are there any thoughts on that from anyone?
We helped Columbus build their climate adaptation plan, and I would strongly encourage, just so you can get to an action phase, but realize it's going to iterate, is expect to go through a planning process or review every 5 years. The U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit has this step-by-step process, but there's a new diagram that's come out that's been in a circular model, and I would strongly encourage, you don't want to be in the constant planning phase, but it is good to step back and go through that deliberately every few years. And I think that's the model we're all going to be in. And it was helpful for us in Columbus and the Midwest to look to other parts of the country, mostly coastal communities, that had gone through our process 10 and 15 years before. And they were on step 2 or 3. And we learned from them. But we knew for our city government, our businesses, our nonprofit sector, our document had to be written not as a document that looked like a scientific paper, but as one that was really visually engaging, because for many of them, it was the first time they'd come across this information. And having a very low level of information with hyperlinks to start them out was really important. And I suspect in about a year or two, we'll probably be starting the process all over again, because ours was released 3 years ago.
I should note that the contractors they've hired are really, really good at this, and that this is the second or third such plan that Santa Cruz is engaged in. This is an update of prior plans. Thank you, Jason. That was really helpful. Hi, Emily. We're talking about Santa Cruz.
Hi, all.
Something, Emily, if you're going ahead, you go ahead, please.
Well, no, I was just going to say I'm only going to be in here for a few minutes today because I'm actually in the GIS federal meeting this week as I try to figure out how all of that software can support these teams. So just hi.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thank you. So just something to bring into the mix. This could be, we've mentioned this maybe a topic for informal discussion somewhere down the line. In dealing with climate action plans in cities, which naturally in California one has done for quite some time, something our organization has just found itself having to deal with just because we've come across it. When you come across something important, you either just ignore it or you delve deeper and you can see what about it is. So in California, we have, as mentioned in Santa Cruz, we've had climate action plans for quite some time. The city of Oakland, well, they're basically required by the state of California. If you want to get some of these billions of dollars that come from cap and trade, you better have a climate action plan. And most cities have them, and they have a basic model, and it's kind of, they more or less follow the same thing. Unfortunately, the city of Oakland is a city that, while it had a climate action plan in 2010 to 2020, and now has a second one. Talking to the people who did it, whatever, within about a year it was abandoned. And for 9 years it wasn't even being followed. It was just a plan. It was a thing we talked about, but nothing was ever done about it. In fact, the city would deliberately go against it on many, many occasions. Among the excuses is, well, it was so ambitious. We had 147 goals to meet, and that's just too many, so we couldn't do any of them. Or no, in reality, Oakland did did some things well and some things very badly. The broader one is, and this is a thing for kids, we're seeing interest in kids and people taking that interest in things, is are we willing to bring up, are we willing to say, when the state money comes out and the cities come up, we do things, do we reward everybody equally? Those that really do a great job and really care and do things, and those that just have a climate action plan just so that they can get money and have no intention of doing things. So it doesn't really matter if you do a great job or you're just faking it. And I would think that, in Oakland, people are pretty pissed. I've talked to teachers when we talk about planting trees. Nobody wants to plant trees anymore. Many of the teachers don't want to do with it because the trees just die. They plant them, they get the money, or they actually remove them, and they're removing healthy trees so that they can then put in new trees to get the money. It's crazy stuff that's going on. Plus, they're smashing the African American organizations. We've had some of the leading African American organizations, and the city has just smashed them. And I want to get Oakland back on track, but if it's going to be this way, I want it to be an example of, kind of a cautionary tale. And working toward that. But anyway, I don't want to put. I'm not bringing this up to throw a wet blanket on things. Overall, we've got incredibly things. Climate action plans are essential, but just bringing in the one that just by having a plan is that all it takes, right? You just write a plan and then everything's fine and everything's okay.
I think there needs to be a achievable goal. Set milestones that have to be achieved.
Agreed. And I would say one of the learning things is you want the plan, or you want the thing that has constant public engagement, where there is actual evaluation. Are you actually doing things? And if they're not, the city gets its feet held to the fire. Or you have plans that allow the public and the community just to not have to have everything go through the city and it be approved by the city. Right. So those are a couple of things to learn of it. But by the police, again, I want to stress the whole point is to get good action and have a good outcome. This is certainly not saying, oh, California and states and other things, it's never going to go anywhere. No, that's not the point at all.
If I can just comment, the city planning process, as I see it, is an excuse to animate the community as a whole and have them really own the process and move forward with their own motivations, gifts, insights, and power when it needs to be exercised. Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, just to kind of hearing completely what Jim you're talking about, and growing up in Oakland my whole life, this is the sort of the conundrum of Oakland, right? You've got this microcosm of diversity, incredible opportunity to bring multicultures together. That's what I grew up with, going to school, friends from all backgrounds, and ambitious plans, great ideas. We're sort of like this think tank, this sort of place where you can just imagine what things could be if we really all work together and do things well. But then on the ground, it's like so ambitious, there's no focus. So how do we so I just feel like if there were, rather than 20 things, this is the classic, right? We need 3 things, and we need to sort of hone in on those and tell those stories. And it's just so complex, it's literally, it's like, and Oakland's not alone, certainly in our country or in the world being a microcosm of society, but there's just so much promise. But you try and take just one example, people that don't speak the same language, literally, right? We've got cultures that my wife teaches in a school where there's many different Asian cultures, and they don't, you know, the English is not the first language. She's got Latinos in her school. She's got African Americans. And the promise of her school is incredible, but how do you really on the ground get them to work together and find these sort of pivotal signature projects that create these successes? And some schools do it, you know, in town, but it's not easy. Yeah, don't know the answer at all, but just trying to find it is fascinating.
Emily?
Yeah, so Eric, when you're talking about the complexity of the multiple target audience groups and multiple behavioral targets, what I'm looking at in the Esri maps is they're able to toggle between them and overlay them. And so I think technologically it's feasible to coordinate all of that. I think that we really need like a dedicated set of people applying those technologies to this issue. And so I think that's almost like a manpower issue, like in like funding issue. Because what I'm looking at with how those technologies are being applied to other infrastructure communities, I see that the tool for doing that kind of multi-stakeholder platform analysis is already developed.
I agree with you. It's something as simple as Facebook algorithms that go ahead and put everything together.
Frank?
I hope it's true what you just said, Laura. I really do, but I don't think it is. You know, I've been a climate education coordinator at NO for 15 years. It is a human enterprise. To really go in and understand the relation, who's active in important ways and how do they relate to each other and build relationships and collaborate. It's a very human enterprise to figure this out. One of the things we found in the ACE dialogues and previous meetings, all the way back to Tamara Ledley, your work on collective impact in the clean community from like 2011, you know, this idea of like a backbone entity for this work is crucial. The literature is clear as day. It's been affirmed in the community that this type of investment would be crucial in Oakland, for example, but it is the one type of investment that no one funds over and over and over and over again. I've heard it so many times. So, you know, if you made an investment in collective impact, backbone infrastructure in a community, you would be able to draw together all of those and build those relationships under the common agenda. I mean, Tamara, I'm just thinking like I'm running your recipe in my head right now, right? So, but that got affirmed again this last summer, especially when you start thinking about justice issues and equitable access to opportunities in this transition economy and reducing vulnerabilities. But the missing piece, the linchpin in this that just hasn't been worked out yet is the funding for that work. And I think, Jim, this picks up, you know, a lot of the work you're describing is that they fund everything but it. So this is why we're trying to advance this piece in the ACE agenda, because we see it as a crucial enabling architecture for this work, going from possible to crucial.
Right. And I think that has to happen at multiple levels. So we're talking about the city of Oakland, but it also needs to be something that is an overarching ACE backbone structure, so that the multiple efforts can be aligned. Because one of the things that's really clear and is really different from a lot of the examples of collective impact efforts that have been successful is a lot of them are very focused on something that is very defined, and it's consistent from one place to another, whereas this is not consistent from one place to another. The impacts are different. Not only the climate impacts are different, but then the ramifications of those impacts are different depending on the culture and the geography and a myriad of other things. So I think that coordination is crucial.
If I could ask a question, just too frank, but I think for all of us, of understanding if and right now in the backbone, the infrastructure and how they're currently looking at, they're of course looking to get funding from the federal level. If a lot of the funding, much of the funding that exists right now is actually at the state level, and again, I'm most familiar with California. I don't mean to make it California centric, but there is definitely money in California through cap and trade, and it's in the billions of dollars that overall are being spent for the purposes of taking on climate education. Not too much in education, but there's stuff in there. Is how to work out, because I totally support ACE and what you're doing. I mean, we all are doing it. It needs to be funded. It's essential. The way in which that could be funded through a state program, would it be that there are like state chapters of it, or a program, say under Amy's 10 strands, it's California based, that is implementing ACE, but it's a state thing? Because I mean, often the state wants to fund things in the state. They're not very strictly not going to fund something in another state. That's understandable. They do that, but is that something working at? I guess basically what I'm saying is, when the things you're saying, Frank, how do we take advantage of the state funding, state money that could help pay for that? And one last one is, I am definitely now in conversation with the California Climate Investment Funding as never before, trying to bring out, because it's trying to, one, identify the bad players and trying to get them on the right page, but to not just use sledgehammers, to basically, we have so many great programs in California, keep funding those, get more funding to those. And I can bring ACE up in that discussion of like, you need exactly the things that Frank was talking about.
Frank, I don't know who you're pointing to, because you're pointing off.
Oh yeah, right now I don't know.
Yeah,
For
it's
me, that's
me.
Deb.
Deb, okay, Deb. Deb,
Specifically,
you're in a totally different row on my screen.
All right. Yeah, I'll weigh in on a couple of those things. So, James, one of the things, and Frank and I often talk about this, and he'll laugh at this, but I often ensure that we're not talking about the ACE strategy as something government would own, because the government doesn't own it. The community owns it, and it's done in collaboration with the government. And so ideally, that's what we're suggesting in the United States. And if that is true, let's make that an assumption, because I certainly do. And we actually just had 2 papers accepted now that are talking more detailed about the process and what the mechanics of this would be. One in the Journal of Science Policy and Governance, and one in Environmental Letters. So those will be helpful to support this. We were like doing the back end run of trying to get research papers in place about the process while we were doing the process. So those are coming out, and I'm working on the 3rd one, which is justice considerations for ACE sort of implementation. So that'll help exactly with what you're talking about, Jim. And so the biggest issue is, if we think about ACE as a community-owned effort, government and community and business and all of us together, then everyone funds ACE, right? So everyone funds it in their own little nugget areas where they're working, and they build across communities with collaborations. And the ACE backbone is not an overseer in the sense of it owns or dictates what the work is. It is a network of networks approach that helps coordinate and build connections and weave together people doing things, not to own the doing of them. That actually would not be very effective at all, but to instead help build those connections and foster learning across communities. And then like this room, actually. So like in this space, like I get to hear what James and Amy are doing in California, and I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna totally hook up with you guys. Katie doesn't own that work, or Anna, or whoever else in Clean. We work across the network through structures like this. So this is a backbone structure for ACE, and could be even more. I've actually been like throwing ideas at Anna for this week. I was like, what about this? What if we did this? so I think like that's kind of the way to conceive of it. And it's back to I think Jason's point, or somebody else had made earlier, about the idea of a strategic plan that sits on the shelf versus a strategic plan that you're like living. That's something else I'm trying to write up right now. I've been in conversations with Tom Bowman, who was one of the writers with me on the ACE national strategy, to try and make clear from what we know about implementation science, from change theory, from all of the research in the space, to try and make clear what is a strategic planning process that is not a historically used planning process, but is much more of an iterative design-based process, a
Yes.
living process.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm trying to work out how to name that in the context of ACE, based on all that other research that's going on in all over the world around change theory. So hopefully I will have that in a brief version at some point in the next week or two, but I'm working on it. It's kind of hard.
Thanks, Deb, for that collaboration. It really does sound like it's built off the work that Frank mentioned that we did in 2010, 11, 12. This idea of networks is very powerful. And I actually had referred to the Clean Network as a rudimentary backbone support organization from the beginning. But again, it needs to be well funded in order to really be effective. And it doesn't own anything. It enables collaboration. Frank?
You know, I'm wondering, given the shared value of this, I'm wondering if we have not done an adequate job of naming the priority here. Jason, I'm looking at your point in the chat here, is that if we know this, and we've known this for years, that this investment is crucial, and Deb, I totally hear you about the government doesn't own it, right? But the government is the largest funder in this space, right? So we don't own it, but we've got some funding issues, and we come and we go, and we fund at the highest level, and then we go down and we go back up, and there's lots of terror and all that. But nonetheless, I think we've got to do a better job of calling out this investment type against projects, small grants that run 2 to 3 years, and then what? We learn something, but that learning goes maybe nowhere most of the time.
That was what was so powerful with the REAMP project, out of which Collective Impact first came. They started with $1.5 million and spent a year and a half studying all the parts of the system and building the relationships across all the parts of the system. And it's always kind of blown me away that they were able to invest that kind of money, and then eventually they had this extraordinary outcomes and developed a whole new model of change.
Right.
I will say, just to pick up on the Santa Cruz theme again, what is so exciting here is that we have a number of very strong organizations with strong grass tops leadership. And we have the city people working with us, very committed to giving a considerable amount of ownership and leadership to the community. So we're not having to fight uphill with that. Funding is another matter.
Yeah. So we only have about 10 minutes left, but I'm also interested if there's any updates for the overarching ACE strategy, which is one of the questions that was put in at the beginning. Are there any updates on what's going on there?
You want me to take this?
Sure.
Simple thing is we are trying to get the administration to formally commit to an ACE national strategy, name an ACE national focal point, and commit to delivering an ACE national strategy by COP21 or there soon. I mean, when we get started, but that is in process. We may have a decision this week.
So it's that eminent. I mean, they've actually
Yeah.
seen it. It's actually been given to them, and
it's as you know, with bureaucracies, it moves up levels. And let's just say it's moving up levels inside on multiple lines, and it is being pushed on outside simultaneously. So there is some convergence. A singularity is coming into John Kerry's office as we speak.
Oh, great.
I'll add a couple of things
Heat
to
and
that.
pressure are increasing.
Yeah.
I think we might be going into the metamorphic and on our way to the igneous.
Ribosomal.
Right.
Frank, it's the other way around. You go from igneous to, and then eventually
No,
metamorphic.
it goes both ways. The
Oh
rock
my
cycle
gosh, you
works
guys,
both ways.
geoscientists arguing about geology.
But seriously, I mean, you know, because what we came to is we really need the official charge of this by the administration, because it is a government action under the treaty, and we need that decision, because from that we can resource, we can fundraise, we can do other things, so that it is truly, as Deb has shared, not just a government entity. If we get non-federal funders of equal or greater amount, it allows us to keep it not a government function. And so there's a powerful move there, but we're going to have to make that true. I am fighting like hell to get as much resources out of NOAA's existing budget and staff in order to make this true. NOAA is incredibly excited about doing this at very high levels, not politicals. We don't have our politicals yet. Okay.
Yeah, I'll add a couple other things to that, Frank. So, so the ACE sort of coordinating team plus, which is expanding in different ways, has been briefing everyone and their dog that they can get a hold of as part of this effort. And that includes, we've been briefing different people inside the Canadian system as well as the American system to help kind of build the North American motivation to engage. And so, and that has been quite successful, I think. So that's been helpful. And then really making sure that we are, as we're doing this, like working to make coherence of the different people that are doing things like the Climate Change Education Act, that are doing other types of moves internally, to not create a competitive stance that's not productive to anyone, but to create a really cooperative stance and make sure that the things that we hold dear, like justice, I have to say, are held central all across these efforts, regardless of if they where they initiated from, don't care, as long as they're coherent and that they're kind of coming at it with the same principles. And so that effort's been done to make sure that we're keeping touch with all the different organizations that are doing lobbying efforts right now. So it's a giant moving puzzle, both internal and external to government right now, but just kudos to the entire group of ACE community folks who have been working on that. And we do see things moving, even if, and I really don't think this is going to happen, but even if the federal government didn't engage in an ACE strategic planning, that's just not a reality. I just don't think that's going to be a thing. It doesn't really matter because states are doing it. Like, and so it's kind of like, you know, states are starting to get on board. New York, New Jersey, Washington, like they're starting to like think more deeply about more coherent strategy.
Well, I think Deb, it's important though to remember. I mean, we watched this in basically the COVID crisis. Is yes, all the states are stepping up to do it, but without that national coordination, it's somewhat broken.
That's right. So and totally, Tamara, because like the problem is without that national coordination, all of the money that is getting spent at the national level is not coordinated and may be in fact in conflict with the efforts that folks are doing. Yeah, absolutely.
But also let's remember that the state's budgets are smashed right now, and that for the near term, while it is absolutely true, state action and city action and county action and subnational action plays a crucial role in this strategy. The resourcing of it right now is very challenging. And so federal resources can play an outsized role in jumpstarting some of these things and playing some of those coordinating, enabling structures while the state budgets come back online in the near future. So that there's like a, you know, keeping your eye on the next 6 months. And then the next 6 months after that, there's some really important steps in here that if we're going to do this and we're going to resource it, but I will tell you, when you talk to a lot of when we do some of these briefings with people who lead climate action, they're starting to hear that what we do is crucial to their success. And that's new because they're getting humbled. because doing climate action without the people being deeply engaged and supportive and having the skills to do the work that they're calling for, they're starting to realize that, oh, wow, but we don't know how. And like, let's talk. But that's shifting because they're getting humbled in climate action. And that's because it's hard. And people don't know what they're doing. They don't know how much change they're talking about. They're starting to push back. They're like, what? You're going to put solar panels over our agricultural fields? I don't like that. And we're like, well, what's your trade-off? So anyway, I'm just talking, I live just south of a lot of agricultural fields, and this is the battle going on in Maryland. You know, and you're like, community dialogues, maybe that would be good. Anyway, it's a fun time, lots going on,
Yes.
but we'll have to keep up to date with each other. And that's why the network is crucial to this.
Okay, well, we are just at about the end of our hour. Are there any other final comments on this topic or anything else? Okay, well,
Thank you. It was very,
thank you very much. Very good
helpful.
conversation, everybody.
Helpful conversation.
Be well, all. Be safe.
Okay, yes, you too.
Bye, everyone.